surprisingly strengthened New Zealand dollar. Rightio, a bit of a start at what's happened last week, some news coming up, but really what we're interested in what's going to happen this week. Leading us away with some fundamental overview is Alexis. Alexis, what do you got for us?
Hello. Can you hear me? All right.
Hi, we can hear you fine.
Yeah.
We can hear you. We can see you. Everything is good.
All right, awesome. Okay, so I'll just take the screen and just a quick update on the fundamentals. So fundamentals usually medium, as I mentioned before, it's medium to long term because it does take time for stuff to change. It does take time for markets to react. So we've been on the euro dollar watch, I think, since a couple of weeks. And again, I think last week, if I'm not wrong, I think Ainslie pretty much called it, where she said that if the price breaks this low test bar, this level over here, the price would actually waterfall down, and actually Ainslie called it pretty accurately, and it really did drop, really sink, straight away from this bottom of the channel. So what next after last week's so-called drop is, let's just have a little bit of understanding on two things here. One is the euro and as well as the US dollar. So a quick peek into the US. All right. So there's this whole talk about Trump versus Biden and what's going to happen. And I'm just going to give you guys a couple of websites or resources that you can go read out on yourself. And I'll probably just post the links later on after my session so that you guys, if you are really interested, you can go read up on your own. So basically, what we're looking for is Trump, he's a Republican, and Biden's a Democrat. And what this website tells you is the comparison chart of their philosophies, their stance on spending, etc., etc. So, in a way, this kinds of sets the stage for example, there is expectation if Trump wins. Investors or analysts, they are expecting US dollars to continue to strengthen. If Biden wins, then they expect the US dollar to weaken. So this is just a general kind of analysis, right? In terms of based on their policies, what the president will do for the US currency. And that is probably one reason why the US election is pretty much talked about, is because the political parties' stance on certain monetary policies and fiscal spending will kind of direct where the currency will go. All right. So this is, again, to understand a little bit more about the complication of the election. I've got another article here where there is debates or there is discussions already where they're talking about Trump or Biden, who's actually best off for the dollar or the euro. All right, and again, I'll post the article in the website. I'm just going to give you a summary. Is that there are two camps on this, and one of the camp which I find really interesting is, regardless of whether Trump or Biden wins, all right, there is an expectation that the US dollar will continue to strengthen over a longer period of time. And this is really interesting because, we have been talking about US dollar weakness for a while. And I am kind of a little bit more in the camp of dollar strength. And mainly and I come from a very numbers point of view, it's mainly the stats. All right. So if over the last, let's say, quarter, couple of months, we kind of track the figures coming out from the US, we kind of track the figures coming out from the euro. And the figures I'm looking at mainly are inflation as well as the unemployment rate. So interestingly enough, next week, towards the end of Friday, we have the US unemployment rate coming up. So that should give us, again, whether or not it's in so-called in line with our expectations. So again, if we look at just the unemployment rate, it's really curious to see that the unemployment rate has been steadily dropping. All right. I know it's not something to joke about, but is it because people are not quite making it? That's why we need more people to get the jobs. I don't know. All right, but this is like tangent thought. All right, the death rate is so high. It's in a way, positions are being vacated. If it's a little morbid way of saying it, so don't quote me on that. But it's curious enough that the unemployment rate in the US is steadily dropping. You can see every time they do a statistic release, it's 1% down, 1% down, 1% down, 2% down. So I'm really curious to see what the next number will be. All right, if we compare it, let's say, for example, just the euro area in terms of jobless rate, you can see on the contrary, it has been increasing, maybe not at a 1% rate, but it's increasing steadily. And even for countries, part of the euro set will be Germany. You can see Germany has also been increasing. So I only mentioned Germany because it comprises Germany and France comprises one of the bigger groups in terms of the euro market area. So France has been dropping, so I guess that kind of evens it out. Now, if we look at countries like UK sort of stable and a slight spike, in terms of unemployment rate. And we compare this with inflation. So I'm switching over to inflation. If you look at inflation on the US, you can see inflation, as I mentioned 2 weeks back, it's been steadily going up. So I'm really curious to see whether inflation or productivity will continue to go up to kind of sustain. Inflation has to kind of go up if jobs are being increased, right? Because it has productivity and unemployment kind of inversely related. All right. So if we look at the euro side again, you see inflation has dropped into the negative band. All right. So which goes to show, based just on, if you talk about productivity, we talk about unemployment figures in terms of GDP generation. All right. Then I would say that there is a probability there that supports the continued weakening of the euro and the continued strength of the US dollar, despite whatever the election says. All right, because at the end of the day, while news and election moves markets in certain directions due to speculation, I think the medium to long-term view is really whether or not the company is healthy enough to continue producing, to continue keeping its people employed, to continue keeping its inflation numbers at a certain level, and to keep the unemployment figures down. So my take for the euro dollar is, for now, still a look towards the downside. Also, if you kind of add on Lagarde's so-called view, I mean, the Europe side has been worried about the strength of the euro. So I guess they really won't be they probably will be pleased that the euro is dropping a little bit. And especially for Germany relies a lot on exports. So I guess they wouldn't be unhappy about the weakening of the euro in terms of a trade perspective. So what I'm looking forward for next week, is more opportunities on the euro dollar, especially on the shorter time frames, because I use the fundamentals for a longer term bias, but the shorter time frames for entry position. So I will be looking at probably more retracement first, right? Wait for retracement first and look for opportunities to then enter into certain horizontal levels. And for those of you who trade my strategy, you will know what levels I'm looking for. So we'll see you guys next week on whatever show we'll see you on. All right. So any thoughts on the euro dollar, rest of the guys? I think that's my 5 minutes. Yep.
Cheers, Alexis. Thank you for that. Look, Helen, it's the same